there's a few more things I wanted to review because we mentioned a few important dates in the last interview, and I just want to review those because they're very important dates. Firstly is we talked a little bit about the 5-year plans, and then we talked about the Lend-Lease. So I just wanted to remind people, you had mentioned that this is when Stalin started accepting help from the Freemasons during the 5-year plans and the Lend-Lease.
Yes.
So I was going to just review a few of these dates. But before we do that, there's another thing I wanted to ask you. Now, we talked about how Andropov and Babkov were telling the public that we are suppressing the Freemasons, but secretly they were not suppressing the Freemasons. And now I'm wondering if there was a similar thing that happened in the 1927. There was this 15th Congress, the 15th Congress in 1927, and this is where Stalin announced that we must crack down on religion. And then there was a guy, and I probably can't say his name, Yemelyan Yaroslavsky.
Yeah, Yemelyan Yaroslavsky, yes.
Okay, so he became the head of the anti-religious committee. So I'm wondering if there was a similar thing going on here back in 1927 when they were talking about we're anti-Freemason, but secretly they were not anti-Freemason.
Oh, this is very hard to say, but because you mentioned that Bobkov and Andropov publicly say that we are suppressing Freemasons, that is not true. They never say so publicly, because in the Soviet Union there was a rules, never talk about the Freemasons. So after Stalin's death, there were like unwritten law, same like it was politically incorrect, and nobody talk about the Freemasons whatsoever. There were absolutely no books on Freemasons, no article on Freemasons. No one ever pronounced the word Masons or Freemasons in TV or in radio or in any kind of printed media. And in no way someone can talk like this. So the fact that there were a special department within the 5th Chief Directorate of the KGB that was tasked with suppressing the Freemasons, that was internal matter. And they never say that publicly. And publicly, the Freemasons did not exist because, you know, the Freemasons has the main why they are so successful, because they created the notion that they do not exist, and everyone who talk about the Freemasons is a conspiracy theorist or the crazy person who's placed in the lunatic asylum. You know that. So that is actually why no one wants to talk of the Freemasons. Now they talk a little bit better about them, but that started only from the end of the 90s. But before the end of the 90s, not only in the Soviet Union, but everywhere in the world, it was extremely politically incorrect to talk about the Freemasons. There were absolutely no books on the Freemasons before 1999. There were only formal articles in some encyclopedia that were very small. Or there were mentioning of the Freemasons from the very old books, like from the books of the 19th century, of the earlier 20th century. Yes, because they don't want just to destroy these books. That is why you can encounter something about Freemasons only in the old books, but not in the books that were contemporary, not in the articles. They never talk about the Freemasons at all, because the Freemasons made the order that we have to create the impression that we do not exist. So that was the point.
It's also interesting, maybe it's just a coincidence or maybe not, but you spoke about this 40-year thing, and it's actually interesting, I found, that the creation of this anti-religious committee in 1927 was exactly 40 years before the creation of this 5th Directorate. So anyway, let me jump back to the 5-year plans. I just want to review this because not a lot of people know much about the 5-year plans. So I just wanted to go through that really quick. The first 5-year plan from 1928 to 1932 the Soviet Union went from number 5 industrial nation of the world to the number 2 industrial nation of the world. And they got a lot of help from the Americans. For example, in 1929, Henry Ford started building the Stalingrad tractor plant. And Albert Kahn was the architect. You know, they got a lot of help to build. Because what was happening, there was a big, in 1929, Stalin started a program which I think he called the public tractors for the farmers. You know, the farmers, now there was like a free tractor. You can just go borrow the public tractor, plow your field. Before, you don't have to use your hands anymore. You can borrow the public tractor. And probably most of those tractors came from America. And then they started building Russia's first tractor factory, you know. So during this first 5-year plan, they got a lot of help, and they were able to give tractors to the farmers. Okay, and then the second 5-year plan, 1932 to 1937, the Soviets increased their steel production. They became number 2 in the whole world, just behind Germany in the production of steel. And also during the second 5-year plan was when they built most of the railways. But they built the railway networks, they increased their steel production, but they were still lacking coal and oil. This was, it didn't get accomplished. After the third, then finally the third 5-year plan, 1938 to 1941, this was when they began preparing for war. The truck factories were converted to tank factories. They were just getting ready for war, and America was helping them. And they knew the war was coming. 1938, you know, Hitler was coming to power and stuff. And then finally in 1941, you have the Lend-Lease. And this is very important. America paid over 11 billion to the Soviet Union. They gave jeeps, tanks, jet, fuel, artillery, food, gold, and other minerals. Okay, and so this was $11 billion that was transferred to the Soviet Union during the World War II period. And as the name of the program is called, the Lend-Lease, the theory is that we're going to lend you this equipment, and after the war, you give it back to us. But of course, they never gave back any of this material. And they kept all the jeeps and the tanks, and then even there was some secret transfers, even more bombers, and they were getting ready for the Korean War. They knew the Korean War was coming as early as 1948. All right, so these are some very important historical events. Now there's another one that maybe you can tell us more about. In 1949 to 1950, there was an event known as the Leningrad Affair. It was one of Stalin's purges, okay? So Stalin started purging out a lot of people. And now there's a famous quote from Khrushchev, which I would like to read and see your comments, okay? There's a quote from Khrushchev here. Khrushchev said, "I simply can't explain how he was saved from being eliminated along with the others. Kosygin, as they say, must have drawn a lucky lottery ticket." So here's Khrushchev saying, I don't know how Kosygin survived Stalin's purges. Mm-hmm. And so my theory would be is probably the reason he survived is because he's Freemasonic connections.
Possibly, but I don't have any proof of that. But just yeah, very possibly. Because the Communist Party after Stalin's and even before Stalin was heavily penetrated by the Freemasons on all levels. Otherwise, it was not possible for Freemasons to hijack the Soviet Union. And of course, because they were heavily penetrated by the Freemasons, anyone can be connected to them like Kosygin or anyone. But I have no proof because you know that is secret. And you cannot know the secrets of the Freemasons as a secret organization. It's really very, very top secret. It's more
Yeah.
secret than any secret service in the world.
Yes. Let me jump back in here to the last couple points. I did a little research on this switching over of North Vietnam. This is a very shocking thing that you revealed last time. So I did a little research on this, and this is what I'm coming up with, was that in 1968, the North Vietnam launched a series of offensives. The first one was called the Tet Offensive.
Yeah.
And then they had the Phase 2 and the Phase 3 attacks.
Yeah.
All of these failed. Now, after these failed attacks in 1968, Le Duan, the president, was forced to reassess his strategy. And like, okay, we're not going to win this way. So then finally in 1969, Ho Chi Minh died.
Mm-hmm.
And after Ho Chi Minh died, his vice president, and I don't know if I can pronounce his name, Tong Duc Tang, he came into power in 1969. And this may be when they started changing their strategy. Like, okay, maybe we can get the help from the Freemasons here.
You see, you have to understand that the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, after the Stalin's death, became like a revisionist communist party. So it was absolutely hijacked by the Freemasons. Again, I refer to the article in Wikipedia on Lavrentiy Beria. Open it, please, and look at the star with the satanic eye on it in the Time magazine. That is, the Freemasons, they were open on this. They didn't even hide that. So the Soviet Union since then, and the Communist Party of the Soviet Union since then belong to the Freemasons. That's why they never built the communism officially. They changed the story completely. They just enslaved the people since then and cheat the rest of the world. But when it comes to China, it was not so, because the Chinese Communist Party was still originally Communist Party. So by the time of the Vietnamese War, Vietnam was, maneuvering, because the Soviet Union was richer and it can provide more help compared to China. But the original Vietnamese communists hated the Soviet Union for their betrayal of the communism, and for that they become the Freemasonic puppets. But in the Vietnamese Communist Party, there were also Freemasonic agents as in any other communist party. So there was an internal struggle between them also. So as a result, the situation was like this. Originally, Vietnamese communists were supported to the bigger extent by the Chinese, not by the Soviet. But closer to 1969, when the Freemasons begin to get more influence in the Vietnamese Communist Party, it became more and more pro-Soviet. And when Ho Chi Minh died, it became completely pro-Soviet. So it just cut relation with the Chinese Communist Party completely at that time. But the point is that in Vietnam there were two different communist parties. There were Communist Party of Northern Vietnam that were originally pro-Chinese and then switched to be pro-Soviet. And there were also Communist Party of Southern Vietnam that was called Viet Cong, that was underground. And that was until the end supported by the Chinese. So since the betrayal of the North Vietnamese communists, since they became revisionists, and some leaders of the North Vietnamese party even ran away to China, so they just defected to China. In fact, they were not happy with North Vietnam policies anymore after 1969. There were this problem, so that the Chinese continued to support South Vietnamese Communist Party, the underground one. And the Soviet Union began to support the North Vietnamese Party, and in the same time to make it more and more Freemasonic and the counter-revolutionary. So the Americans look at this because they were in Vietnam just to prevent the communism, because they were there by the Freemasonic order, in fact. Because the communist was communist ideology was very dangerous for the Freemasons. So that's why they sent the American troops to fight with the dangerous ideology. But after the death of Ho Chi Minh, it was obvious that the North Vietnamese communists are no longer dangerous because they become as revisionist as the Soviet Communist Party. So there were actually no more reason for the American troops to be there. If the American troops continue to be there, the China will support more and more a South Vietnamese Communist Party that was still under the Chinese control, and that was not good actually, because if the American troops withdrew from Vietnam whatsoever, and left the South Vietnamese government face the North Vietnamese, supported by the Soviet Union, the North Vietnamese would, of course, defeat the South Vietnamese. And the North Vietnamese Communist Party will subjugate the South Vietnamese party. And of course, it will cleanse it from the pro-Chinese element, and there will be no more Chinese influence in Vietnam whatsoever. You understand the point?
Yeah.
That's why the Americans decided to withdraw their troops and to leave the South Vietnam face their defeat. So eventually the pro-Soviet North Vietnamese Communist Party defeated the South Vietnam, invaded the South Vietnam, occupied it, annexed it, and the former underground South Vietnamese Communist Party became as a part of this North Vietnamese Communist Party. And of course, all the pro-Chinese elements there were cleansed, and it became just another Freemasonic creature, same like the Soviet Communist Party. That's just very, very simple to understand why they withdraw.
Yeah. So let me come back to this last point. It's a very interesting point, and this is where you talked about Gagarin. Now, this is a subject I haven't studied much. I've heard different theories. The theories, okay, but first of all, let me say what you told us last time for sure is that there was a fake burial of Gagarin. They put his ashes in the Kremlin wall, but that was a fake because he was hiding out with his Freemason buddies in America.
Yes.
All right. So now the thing is, the theories I have heard is that in the early Soviet space program, there was a lot of failures, and the Soviet Union wanted to keep some of these failures secret. Yes. And there was a lot of people who were dying going up in those rockets, and they didn't want Gagarin to die like that. So that's why they never even put him in the rocket.
Yes.
This is just one theory. Or do you have any other what to say about?
Yes, that's exactly what you say. I cannot say that there were a lot of people who died, but there were at least 2 or 3. And they would, of course, because the Soviet Union did not like to publicize any failure, they just want to keep it secret. So it's understandable.
And so also Gagarin, you in your opinion, Gagarin himself never actually went to space.
Of course not. It was fake completely.
Okay. Yes, it's like I said, I've heard different theories, but I don't know what to believe. I haven't studied this subject so much, but that's really great that you're sharing on that.